emanates from a January 12th, 1963 concert in Miami, Florida by the one and only Sam Cooke. The concert was released as a full-length album in June 1985 entitled Live at the Harlem Square Club and is considered to be one of the greatest live albums of all time. Matt, what's your background in Sam Cooke as an artist, knowledge? How familiar were you coming into this segment?
I knew his name, and I've heard of him before. And that was it.
That was the entire, not even knowing like You Send Me or something like that?
I couldn't have, like a half hour ago, 45 minutes ago, whatever, I would not have been able to name you one Sam Cooke song.
Okay, so this is a true cold listen, and what is soon to be a scorching hot take as well, I'm sure, Matt.
Oh, no doubt.
Well, then let's not belabor things anymore. What I am going to do is I'm going to go ahead and say we're on when the clock starts, and I'm going to start by asking Matt to give his initial impressions. So we are officially on.
All right. So before we started this, I was having a really like just one of those blah days because, John, I didn't really sleep too much. I went to bed late. I didn't get a good night's sleep, and you know how I am when I don't sleep very well. So I've been very lethargic. I've been very tired, very unmotivated. The Giants went 0-5 today. It just did a heartbreaking loss to the Cowboys, so I wasn't feeling so good. And then I put this record on, and I feel awesome right now. Like that was such a great record. That was what I was hoping to feel when we covered the James Brown Live at the Apollo album.
Okay.
This was just rip-roaring, fun, dancing music. I mean, off from the bat, I think the first track, the first real track, Feel It, Don't Fight It, is all about like, hey, if you're listening to the music and you're feeling that groove, like, just let it happen, man. Don't fight it. You know you want to dance. You know you want to feel good. And that's exactly how I felt throughout this entire record. And then the last track, Having a Party, was just like, hey, after you leave, I got to go tonight, but after you leave, keep having that party, man. Everything's a party. Just have fun. And I felt that way throughout this entire record. This was fantastic. And even though I didn't know any Sam Cooke, I couldn't have told you any Sam Cooke songs before, there are a lot of familiar songs in here, and it's almost like half of the songs on this were the soundtrack from the '80s movie Inner Space. I don't know if you caught that, but Cupid and "Twistin' the Night Away" were highlights musically from that film with Martin Short and Meg Ryan and Dennis Quaid. So that definitely brought back memories. And of course, I know "Bring It On Home to Me."
Right,
that's a classic song. So it's one of those things where I knew the songs, but I just didn't know they were Sam Cooke songs. So
this was a 10-song album, really 9-song, because the first minute 23, which is track 1, is basically just an introduction in the style that you would imagine like a James Brown album as well. Someone coming in and basically introducing Sam Cooke. And then for 9 songs, it doesn't relent, does it? And there's hits that I do not make the Inner Space connection myself, but "Twistin' the Night Away" and "Bring It On Home" to me, and "Chain Gang." These are all, even "Cupid." These are all songs that if you listen to oldies radio or just have a background in R&B, these are going to be familiar songs for you. And these are also songs that have been covered quite a bit. But yeah, I mean, as a live album, my only complaint, and it's a minor complaint, is it does get a little samey in terms of subject material at times, but Sam Cooke is such a good singer that you're able to immediately put yourself in the vibe of what it would be like to be in the crowd at this album. And this is very much a live album, very much a live album, not just in terms of how it's recorded, but also how it's situated, and you feel as if you're sitting in the crowd listening to Sam Cooke perform for you. And in this era of, quarantine, right? It's where we're not able to go to concerts. It was a really cool way to start off this project because there wasn't a bad song on here. As a live performer, Sam Cooke is fantastic, one of the best crooners, and his life is fascinating too, especially the one night stand nature of this album title, because I know that his the way he left the world, unfortunately, did play into that subject.
Oh, really?
As it did, yes, pretty infamously. So, what did you think about the musicianship in the background behind Sam Cooke?
Oh, it was great. It was. I mean, I liked a lot of saxophone solos. It's very it's just very energetic. I thought the musicianship was great. I thought his voice was fantastic. Right. I mean, you say crooner. I don't know if I would use that term. I mean, he's got a very raspy voice, and the way he does some call and response stuff in here, which I think I was talking about when we did the James Brown album, the Live at the Apollo album, how I was kind of turned off by that a little bit, that it was a little bit much. And the crowd noise was a bit off-putting in that record. I didn't really find that here. You can hear the crowd noise, but there's a couple of parts even where they're singing along. He gets the crowd to sing along, and they sound really good. The audience sounded good, singing back to him. So I found this a much more enjoyable live record. And yeah, the musician, I thought it was, pretty standard blues stuff, soul blues kind of music that was just done really well, really upbeat, and a lot of fun.
Yeah, I know Sam Cooke is known for having one of the great voices in rock music, and also as a singer, he's not easy to define, especially when you put this in 1963, because it seems as if it could have just as easily come later in the mid-'70s, for example, because a lot of Marvin Gaye and 70s R&B artists sound similar, right? And as you said, call and response and sort of the way he sings. Also, you can see a natural evolution to soul music as well. But he's right in the middle of just, when doo-wop and girl groups are starting to come and the Motown sound is starting to present itself as well. So he's kind of an interesting artist to place. You know what I'm saying by that? It's in that he doesn't really fit any label neatly, and this album really reinforces that. It's
a little bit of everything, I think, from the era, and it's some of it sounds like 50s, kind of it could have been from the 50s, right? And maybe some of these songs were originally recorded in the 50s. But yeah, he's kind of drawing on a lot of those early rock and roll type sounds, R&B, soul, blues, and it's all kind of just mixed up together, and it's just done really well. I thought that there was some good humor. I found myself laughing out loud a couple of times, when he's talking about, he wants to talk to his girlfriend. He's like, I'm trying to call my baby, and somebody answers the phone, and it's the operator. And I say, listen, operator, I don't want to talk to you. I want to talk to my baby, And I'm just like, and the way he's talking about that, it made me laugh. So, he sounded like a great performer. You're absolutely right, John. I felt like, because I listened to this, try to close my eyes because I knew I was only going to get one listen. So I really wanted to make sure I was focusing in and not distracted. And it does kind of give you that feeling like you're kind of there, with the recording, because you can always kind of hear the crowd in the background a little bit. And there is that feeling like you are kind of there. And that, if I would have seen that show, that I would have walked away saying that's one of the best shows I've ever seen. I could totally see that being just a phenomenal experience. And
you can see why he had crossover appeal too, because as you mentioned, these songs were just as at home on the traditional charts. And when I say traditional, I mean the mainstream radio charts. We talked kind of before about how James Brown had a difficult time breaking through to, I guess, what you would call white radio. Sam Cooke, we haven't done the full research right here, but I know he had a greater success breaking through. And you can see why, because of sort of the inoffensiveness of the content. It's similar content to what was being sung about in pop music at the time. But let's talk about, we're at the halfway mark, so let's talk about some of the tracks that might have stood out for you. For me personally, the two standouts were track number 2, Feel It, Don't Fight It, which really jumps you right into the album. It's also that's close. That or Nothing Can Change This Love, the second to last song, are close to being the shortest songs on the album. And then his version of Bring It On Home to Me as well, I thought was excellent at track number 8. And those stand out because the instrumentation rises and falls as he sings, and his voice, it's almost like they're scoring his voice would be the best way I would describe it, Matt.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's hard for me to say. I mean, I think the one I was feeling most was "Twisting the Night Away," but I also knew that song. And I think that's really in the part of the album that I was really just thinking to myself, I'm going to love this whole thing. Like this is just I see what he's doing, and I started kind of feeling it more as it went along. So I couldn't say that about "Feel It, Don't Fight It" because I was still early in the listen for me. "Bring It On Home to Me" I liked a lot. I didn't even know. Who did that originally? I don't know off the top of my head, and this is the downside of not being able to do the research. Okay, because I wasn't sure if that. I'm like, I assumed it was his song originally. But I think the beginning of that, that was actually, if I'm not mistaken, that was the one where he was talking about the operator, and so the beginning of the song, it's a longer track, but the beginning, he's kind of, it's not really part of the song yet. It hasn't really kicked in, so it's kind of like this, almost like not like a monologue, but it's kind of like the music's playing in the background, and he's talking about trying to call his baby on the phone. And so I was like, all right, it's not really picking up. And then when it kicked in, I was like, oh, I know this song. This is a great song, So that was a really good performance as well. But I love how it ended with having a party. I thought it was a perfect ender, like for this type of record. It's like, hey, I gotta go, but keep having that party and don't stop. Even if you're in the car by yourself. And I'm like, well, I'm not in the car, but I am by myself, so I'm having my own little party here.
Well, and it left you wanting more, didn't it?
Yeah.
And I will say that it's I'm cheating a little bit here on our stuff. I am, just for the sake of looking at Bring It On Home to Me. It is identified primarily as the Sam Cooke song. However, it is considered to be a reworking of Charles Brown's 1959 single "I Want to Go Home," if you want to know where it came from. But it's been covered by a jillion people, including the Animals and Van Morrison and Aretha Franklin. Even John Lennon covered this, Matt, in his rock and roll album. But we won't go there. Yep. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's that's a fantastic song. And once I realized they were going there, my initial feelings of, because that was probably the beginning of that song, I was like, I think I felt the most, not disappointed, but I was like, okay, whatever, right? And I didn't realize that it was going to kick into that. And when it did, it just it did a 180, I think. I don't, even Chain Gang like that. I didn't know that, like the song like that. That was used in a TV show. Like that was, I remember people using that since one of those 80s comedies. I don't know if it was the Cosby Show or like Silver Spoons or something like that, but I remember like
a lot of your frame of reference is 80s TV, and movies.
Well, that's what they were using. They were using Sam Cooke in the 80s, So, so that was kind of, it was a nice surprise to listen to this, because it gave me like little nuggets of stuff that I knew, which was kind of nice.
So we've talked about this. We got about 4 minutes left. We've talked about sort of, you're looking at this project, Combing the Stacks, as increasing your R&B soul knowledge, correct? Along the way. So we've covered James Brown, but then most of the other soul singers that we've covered so far, it's definitely going to change down the road, but have been female. We had Nina Simone and Aretha Franklin, and then if you want to throw in Motown, we had the Supremes. Where would you put that in the canon of what we've listened to so far?
To me, this is right up there with Aretha Franklin and probably Nina Simone. This was fantastic.
For our listener who may not be familiar, which one would you say it's more like sound-wise?
Oh, Aretha Franklin.
Okay.
Aretha Franklin was like more of that. Yeah, because Nina Simone had some little. It was softer, right? It wasn't as upbeat. Some places were, but some of it wasn't. But Aretha Franklin was kind of more of that traditional R&B soul kind of sound. So I would say it was more like that. But it's kind of like, it's also like James Brown, but I just found this a lot more enjoyable than the James Brown album.
Is that because of Sam Cooke's voice?
To enjoy that one. This one was. No, no, I don't think. I think it's because of the songs, right? Like, this was a better song selection, and it was, I just enjoyed it more.
Well, and he was definitely singing here more than he was performing, and the James Brown album definitely felt like it was raw, it was grittier. It felt like they just recorded the whole thing, right? Warts and all. Whereas this, you can definitely tell that it was spaced and recorded in a way that was designed to be pleasant to the ear, not harsh to the ear. Even, like you said, even with the people in the crowd singing along with him. Then sticking a medley right in the middle of It's All Right and For Sentimental Reasons, which we really haven't talked about either. It's like the perfect placement for that medley as well.
Yes.
It almost makes it side one and side two, doesn't it?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Do you disagree? Did you like this more than the James Brown? Like, how would you compare the two?
I would say that I liked it better than the James Brown album, but that's personal taste, and I think I liked the James Brown album more than you guys did because it gave me live albums to me are a slice of life, right? And so a Sam Cooke concert and a James Brown concert are going to be two very different things. A James Brown concert is going to be dancing, large orchestration, like a whole show, right? Whereas the Sam Cooke thing, you're going there to hear Sam Cooke sing. And that's what this was. You heard Sam Cooke sing with, I wouldn't say light instrumentation, but instrumentation that's designed to buffer his voice, not be right there with it, like in the James Brown.
Right. No, his voice definitely stood out more. He's probably not going as nuts as James Brown is, but it still sounds like he's getting into it and is putting on a good performance, though. I think so. You can't ignore that. I will say though, I do have that Rolling Stone issue in front of me, and it says the little blurb it says about this album was Sam Cooke was elegance and soul personified, but he works this Florida club until it's hotter than hell, all the while sounding like he never breaks a sweat. And when the crowd
is true.
And when the crowd joins in with him on For Sentimental Reasons, it's magic. And I thought that was a good description.
I agree, and that's what I was just talking about before. The placement of that medley really it hammers home that you were in the middle of a show and that the show is still building, and that For Sentimental Reasons is about the halfway mark of the album and it almost serves as an appetite whetter for the rest of the album. So we've got about 30 seconds here, Matt. It sounds like strong recommendation, huh?
Strong recommendation, and real quick, this album is in Best Ever Albums, but it's released in 1985.
Okay.
And so it's number 259 in the 80s, so it's a little different, even though it was recorded in the 60s. But this is an absolute recommend. This is one of my favorite albums that we've covered, period. So
great.
I'm glad we got to listen to it.
Perfect. And look at that. We hit the 15-minute mark on Matt's last word, and so that ends segment number